Okay, let's just take a few minutes to say a little bit about the rest of the Mediterranean and the ancient diaspora. Um, there's so much to say about all of this, but I just want to try and keep my remarks very brief because we will be returning to this in future lectures. So here's our map that shows us the extent of the Roman Empire and the kind of hatch lines. And as you can see, every single dot represents a city where there is a significant Jewish population. The region we should look at right now is the moving from left to right, the Italian peninsula that's shaped like a boot. And I said that in a Canadian way. I hope you recognize it. And then there is the Greek peninsula next to it. We'll also look a little bit at the Eastern Mediterranean as well, which would be like Turkey and so on. The first suggestion of Jewish presence in Greece dates all the way back from the 4th century, and then, of course, after Alexander, there's much more of a presence building in the region. In Rome, we have a very significant population developing. This is especially so when Julius Caesar, in the 1st century before the Common Era, proclaims Judaism a religio licita, which means a legitimate religion, which means it is protected and it has to be respected. And there are certain things that Jews do that they are allowed to do and continue doing because of Roman protection, such as the very dangerous and difficult transportation of the yearly half shekel tax for the maintenance of the temple in Jerusalem. This was a practice which was continued throughout the period of antiquity, and the Romans actually protected it. The few times when, transporting this money was interrupted by official authorities was heavily criticized and represents definitely an exception to the rule because people respected, especially old religions like Judaism. Jews were also granted military exemptions from conscription when they were observant. For example, the whole business with kosher food and the Sabbath makes it very difficult. So in many cases, the Romans were willing to overlook demands on conscripts from Jewish communities. So there's generally, Jews did not so bad in the Roman Empire before the events of the Great Revolt. That's when it got really bad, and of course it went downhill from there. At the same time, while Jews are generally gaining a lot of traction socially and legally coming up to the 1st century, there is a growing social movement as well that you can really see in a lot of the early Greek and Roman writers. There is a basic misunderstanding of what Judaism is all about. There is a concern that Jews are somehow misanthropic, that they hate other people. Why? Because, for example, you can't belong to the religion unless you convert. And this was like a strange idea. Really? I can't just be a Jew because I sort of like Jewish things? No, you've got to go through conversion, whatever that means exactly, but certainly for men it means circumcision. Jews wouldn't eat non-Jewish food, so, you had to keep kosher. There was a lot of Jewish practice that was definitely misunderstood. Like, for example, this total, what seemed to be fanatic ban on any kind of civil religion, like any kind of worship of idols, things like that. The Jews would get really upset about that, and Greeks and Romans were saying, like, what is the problem? It's so basic. I've often compared this to the example of not standing when the national anthem is played at a football game or something like that, which Americans would consider very rude. And by the way, I used this example long before it became an emblem of the social justice movement and Black Lives Matter and so on. But the fact that it has been used to take a knee at a football game is considered offensive to many Americans, is considered such a strong statement that still reinforces the idea of how the Jews would have been perceived if they refused to do some of the basic things that Romans did for their civic religion because they felt that it was against their core principles. Nevertheless, Judaism is a competitive ideology at this time. You have a lot of people who are attracted to Judaism. It represents some real attractive alternatives to the fatalism inherent in Roman paganism, and you have a growing population not only of ethnic Jews who are living in the Italian peninsula before the 1st century, but also fellow travelers, both converts and those who are just kind of like sympathizers as well. One of the really cool ways that we can see the growth of the Jewish population in Rome, and this is a little bit of a detail, but I just think it's so fascinating. We've got to talk about it here, is the discovery of these ancient catacombs of Jews in Rome. It was very common in late antiquity to be buried underground. You can see this map here shows a number of Christian catacombs for burial, and you also see in the south and also in the northeast some regions where there are Jewish catacombs, and they are so fascinating. You go in them and you see that they've got these sort of like shelves on the walls where the bones would have been interred. It's possible that they practiced a two-step burial where first there would be burial in the ground, and then a year later, this is actually described in the Talmud. It's a practice that I do not believe Jews practice anywhere in the world today, but in the ancient period it was common. On the Yortzeit, on the anniversary of the death, they would go and they would exhume the bones, now denuded of all flesh, and there would be a ceremonial bringing of the bones to a family crypt. And so they would enter the catacombs and put them on a shelf next to the ancestors and things like that. Kind of spooky by modern sensibilities, but nevertheless really fascinating. And these catacombs are beautifully decorated, like this really charming palm tree on one wall, and painted ceilings with sometimes decorative animals like peacocks and things like that. Some very moving examples of parental love, like this highly unusual statue of a dead child. You can see he's patting a puppy. Um, it's a great work of art, I think, but very tragic at the same time. Carries the kind of pathos across 2 millennia. And the inscriptions are fascinating. They're almost all in Latin, like this one, or in Greek, like this, which indicates that the awareness of Hebrew and Aramaic was probably lower if their first language for something as permanent as a grave marker would be in a foreign language. But there are some Hebrew and Aramaic inscriptions as well. And the symbol of the menorah is very, very common. That's considered like much more than the Star of David, which is a far later introduction to the Jewish canon of images. The menorah is one of the oldest of the images. It's really cool to look at these catacombs, and there's so much research that can be derived from it, more than we can talk about today. Let's switch a little bit to talk about the Eastern Mediterranean, and by that we're looking especially at Asia Minor, which would include little bits of Syria maybe, but definitely Turkey is a really important place for us. Antioch is one of the most significant of the centers here. And we see that, once again, the role of Jews in the military is quite significant. You have Jews in military formations in this region under Antiochus I and Antiochus III. Those are prior, of course, to the Antiochus IV, who was associated with the Hanukkah rebellion, including 2,000 Jewish families who were military families transferred from Babylonia to this region. Really unusual to see that, I think. There's a strong Jewish community in Antioch in particular, but they have the same kind of communal tensions with Greeks living there as we saw in Alexandria. Throughout the region, there are the presence of synagogues even well before the year 70. And this is something we can also say about Egypt and about Mesopotamia and about the Greek and Roman lands as well. Jews did have gathering places for prayer. They were referred to with the Greek terms proseuche, or synagoga, which basically means like gathering places. The term synagogue does not intrinsically have a religious context. It's actually a translation of the Hebrew term Beit Knesset, which means a house of gathering as well. Jews, even while the temple was operating, wanted to have some kind of way to express their connection to God in a communal fashion. And we have descriptions of this from Josephus and Philo and many other figures as well. Let's just take a concluding look at the Western Mediterranean. In a previous lecture, we looked at the region of Tunis, Cyrene, and a little bit at the island of Crete. Let's just go quickly to the Iberian Peninsula, all the way on the western part of the Mediterranean. And we'll speak a lot more about this region because, of course, it is the heartland of Sephardic Jewry that we have not yet introduced. Up until this point, Jews don't really recognize kind of like differences in cultural orientation. They will refer to each other with geographic locators like stupid Babylonian. It's actually one of the terms used in the Talmud, but they won't necessarily regard them as being of a slightly different ritual or of a slightly different, family of customs, as we will later on. But the heartland of Sephardic Jewry comes from the region of Spain. The first indication we have of any Jewish person in Spain is some evidence of a Jewess living in Adra. And this is from an early 2nd century gravestone, which was transcribed in the late 18th century, a reliable transcription, even though the original gravestone has been lost. The transcription read like this. There's something wiped out, and then the end of the word is nia, and then a new word, salo, something missing, nulla, and then a word an, uno, mens, cuatro, die, uno, Judea, which translates as probably something like here lies a girl's name that ends in the letters Nia, Junia, something like that, daughter of Solomon, aged 1 year, 4 months, and a day. You can see that the Roman numeral 4 is 4 dashes rather than the IV, which also is a testament to its antiquity. And finally, she is specifically denoted as a Jewish girl. And she is our first indication of Jewish settlement in this region. Wow, I can't wait to get back to talk about this some more. But for now, let's wrap up this discussion of the diaspora. The next lecture is going to be some concluding sort of like synthetic remarks about what does antiquity mean in Jewish history and how that differs from the medieval period, which will begin right after that. Thank you very much for watching.